Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to start now. I think it's just gone one. Thanks for being here and welcome to this farm deep dive with Francesca Cooper from Nunwell Home Farm on the Isle of Wight. I'm Jimmy Woodrow. I'm the Chief Executive of Pasture for Life, and just wanted to quickly talk about these farm deep dives, which we started at ORFC a year ago. And really it's to give one farm an opportunity to really get into the weeds about what's happening, hopefully go above and beyond what you would normally get in a panel session where you might be leaving at the end feeling you wish you knew a bit more about one of those farms that was particularly kind of resonating with you. So that's what this is all about. And like the session I chaired last year, I'm going to start with the question, if this was a story, Francesca, where did it all begin?
Well, I suppose I wanted to say I'm really sorry that Hollie's not here as well, because normally we come as a duo, but we couldn't both get away from the farm. So we should have got a cardboard cutout or something, shouldn't we? So yeah, I run the farm with my childhood friend, Hollie. So we met when we were about 6 and grew up together, and both ended up back on the island with small children about 4 years ago. And I suppose the farm probably started about then. We were sat around, obviously, nothing better to do apart from watching our small children crawl around, wondering what we were going to do with our lives. And I am a rural surveyor, so I had worked with farms and estates for the last 10 years before that, and had always sort of been a frustrated farmer. I was brought up on a small holding, so I had some experience of working with animals, but nothing on the scale that we're doing now. But Hollie had also been brought up sort of around the small holding, around animals, had done things mainly with horses. And both of us came from non-farming backgrounds, but both had a passion for farming and especially for nutrition. At the time, and actually just before, we'd gone through a phase of exploring different diets. Both of us went vegan for various parts of that time, mainly because of the planetary impact that we saw, and also some of the farming practices that we didn't really agree with, the industrialized farming and things like that. So yeah, we were sat around wondering what to do with the rest of our lives once our kids had grown up, and heard that a farm was coming up down the road, and so immediately wrote a business plan and pitched it to a landowner, and he was really excited and keen to explore what we'd proposed. And yeah, I suppose that's the rest is history, really.
Yeah. Well, I think it's just amazing with new entrants to farming how all of that experience really, I think we're going to see in due course, really you're bringing to bear on everything that you're doing. So what we're going to do now quickly is give Francesca probably 5 minutes to just explain where she's got to, where she and Hollie have got to, with a few slides to back up. Shall I give you the slide clicker?
Yeah, where is it?
And then after that we'll go into a structured conversation and then make sure there's decent time for Q&A at the end for you all.
Yeah, so this picture that we've got up here is actually a picture of me and Hollie with our landowner, Rob. So we farm in a share farming agreement with him, and he's very much the person that we pivot the business around. We approached him and essentially pitched to him like Dragon's Den. We tried to fix the problems that he had, the bit of land that he wanted. He wanted to have someone or some people to come on and manage the land in a way that was sympathetic with the fact that it's a historic estate, it's listed parkland, and I'm quite passionate about that longevity. It's been in his family for 1,000 years, and also he wanted to have a dynamic business, and he was really excited about having meat from his farm able to sell to his friends, and that was a big part of what we wanted to do, to produce meat and eggs in a way, and then process it and get it directly to consumer, and he was really excited about that as well. So we have 3 enterprises on the farm and a direct sales business. So we have pastured pigs. Pigs are challenging, very challenging, but we were really passionate about experimenting with raising high welfare pork. It's been a journey. We have had to, and I was listening to some farmers talking about this yesterday, sometimes you go into something and you say, I want it to be this way. I want them to be free range all year round. I want them to be soya free. And I want them to be high welfare. And sometimes all of those things don't actually link up. And we've found that we wanted to keep them outside all year round, but actually they were miserable outside all year round, so now we brought them into the barn for a little bit during the winter, and we're just having to be pragmatic and make sure that, I think fundamentally, the animal welfare is the most important thing in this, and so we call it pastured pigs, but actually, I suppose now we are just high welfare, native breed pork, and I think it is important. We were very ideological when we came to setting up the farm. We knew what we thought we wanted to do. And some of those things we have stuck with, and we wouldn't compromise on. But some things, like bringing the pigs into the barn in the winter, it ticked more boxes than having them free range the whole year round. So we manage them outside on arable land, rotating them around that on herbal lays. We also we work with the Wildlife Trust quite closely, and they've used the pigs on their rewilding sites to cause disturbance, and that's been quite an interesting experiment. I think it's a bit of a transient thing that they'll just have them through once just to cause that disturbance. I don't think it's something that we're going to run pigs out there the whole time, albeit once we've got perimeter fencing, we might have a few out there as well. But we have pasture-fed beef, so we have a breeding herd of belted Galloways, and at the moment we're also buying in from other farms and fattening stores. We have around 100 head of cattle at the moment. We are looking to expand that dramatically because we now manage, we started out on 120 acres, we now manage between in-hand land and grazing land with the Wildlife Trust and National Trust, or over 1,000 acres, but that's literally just come online, so we're looking to rapidly expand that. But building cattle numbers is quite a challenge financially because they are quite a big investment. So we've actually been working with the Wildlife Trust and the National Trust, and they are paying us for conservation grazing services, and hopefully we can roll that back into paying for our expansion. And we have pastured laying hens. So we only have 300 laying hens, but they actually are quite a profitable enterprise on the farm. We have them in 2 mobile egg mobiles, which we built ourselves on caravan chassis. Really simple system. We move them once a week, maybe slightly more in the summer. And we'd experimented variously with trying to make them soya-free. At the moment, we haven't got the right feed sources to do that, so they are just on conventional layers pellets, but they have amazing yellow yolks because they're on all of that forage all the time. So I think that's all of my enterprises. So.
Fantastic, thank you. I mean, frankly, even if you take one thing away, the fact that you've gone from 100 acres to now over 1,000 acres is an amazing story around access to land and how things can be cobbled together. And I suppose that's kind of the foundation of perhaps my first question. One of the reasons I'm here chairing this today is for the past 15 years, I've been a probably annoying tourist on the Isle of Wight, year in, year out. So I've got to know these guys and been to their farm a few times. So my first question really is, the Isle of Wight is a unique context to be farming within. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, the Isle of Wight has its challenges. I mean, we just lost our abattoir, which, but that's not unique to the island. We didn't have an abattoir on the island. We've always had to transport it off, but we had an arrangement where we could get the meat back onto the island, and we're all just currently trying to work out what we're going to do at the end of the month. I think that it is interesting. There are challenges, I think, especially for arable farmers, where they have to group their commodity crops to get them off the island. That does limit us when it comes to opportunities like growing heritage grains and things like that. I think that we do have lots of opportunities on the island to try and grow a food culture. We don't, I don't think, have a particularly exciting food culture at the moment. We don't. I think that it's something, there is lots of opportunities, and lots of us are working, trying to grow that. But I don't think, when I look at it objectively, I'm not sure that we've faced many more challenges, apart from the arable guys, than the mainland. Farming is facing all sorts of challenges at the moment. People often point to the abattoir issue because we have to transport them onto the mainland. But actually, we're not travelling much further than lots of people do on the mainland. I've just been speaking to someone who actually travels much further to their local abattoir, even though they're on the mainland. So,
I guess the question is whether cattle get seasick, isn't it? So again, kind of looking back to last year, Rebecca Mayhew, who I was interviewing, was farming with her life partner, Stuart, you're farming with your friend. Can you talk a bit about how that, I suppose, maybe a bit more about how that came about, but also what it's like farming with your friend, and if it's something you're recommending other people to do?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that the same sort of challenges. We have the same challenges as a couple. In lots of ways, we spend a lot of time together. We know each other really well. We always have done. We've worked together on various projects before the farm. We have had some big fights. It's not been easy the whole way. At the beginning, both of us wanted to do everything all the time, and we realized quite quickly that we couldn't do that. We were having to split out different roles, and that's working much better. And also, as the farm's grown and we're getting to the point when we are going to have to employ staff and we're relying on for our own incomes, we've started to realize that we need to really treat our relationship with the respect that it deserves. And we're looking at, we've been doing some coaching with Silas Headley Lawrence, so he's been helping us with sort of mindset change and making sure that we really look at our personality types and how they work together, and that's been really interesting. And we are going to also employ a sort of a business relationship coach as well, because I think it is really important to look at that, because without me and Hollie and the relationship working, the farm wouldn't exist. Even though we have 1,000 acres, lots of cows, fundamentally we have to get on in order to make that work. And I think that not enough farming businesses focus on those relationships, and they can break down and become really toxic, and it's something that we really don't want to happen. So,
and I guess a bit of that's playing out through this bigger question around succession and how you manage kind of family conflicts, perhaps. Do you think you would have gone into farming if it hadn't been for Hollie?
I think at the time, when we started the farm, my brother was also involved in the farm. He quite quickly realised that he didn't want to be a farmer and involved as much as he was, so he stepped back, and then it ended up being just Hollie and I. I think part of the reason why we did go, it became me and Hollie rather than sort of with our partners is financial. We couldn't pay ourselves from the business for the first 3 years, so we had to have outside income, and our partners were bringing that outside income in. So we were farming together while our husbands were supporting our families. So I think it might have worked out slightly differently if we could have all been able to work on the farm. I think our partners were quite keen to do that, but yeah, they just had to have full-time jobs off farm. So
it's a good model, I think, is perhaps what you're saying. And I think actually my friends who work in the kind of more entrepreneurial, startup business side of things often say to me the most successful startups come from people who are generally, in some cases, a little bit older, but mainly acting in concert with someone who they trust and want to work with. So I think that's perhaps playing out in your situation. Kind of sticking on the relationship side, you've mentioned National Trust, Wildlife Trust, they're obviously critical to what you're doing. Talk about that whole area of tenancy and access to land and all of that bit. Yeah,
I mean, the relationships are really important. I've already spoken about Rob. He is incredibly supportive of everything we do. So we went from 120 acres on his estate up to the rest of his estate, because he was like, I just want you guys to run it all, which is amazing. And sort of treating him like our chief investor, and our that we want to constantly make sure that what we're doing is enhancing the value of his estate, and we're working with him, rather than when you're in a tenancy arrangement, you're paying a landlord. There's sort of always a bit of a friction there, I think, with maybe some resentment builds up that you're constantly paying out and they're not feeding back, whereas we are in a share farming agreement, which means that we are sharing the profits of the business together. So he owns a percentage of our business, and we're completely tied together in that. He owns part of the cows, part of all of the infrastructure. And I think that's a really interesting model, and I think it really helps to create a vision for a piece of land, rather than you coming and imposing what you want to do with someone else's piece of land. I think that's really interesting. And that's also been the same sort of way that we've approached working with the Wildlife Trust and the National Trust. They have a vision for their land, and we've taken time to understand what that vision is, and we have experience in working in conservation and through my work before, I can understand all the schemes and outcomes that they need, and so it's quite easy for them to trust us that we will be fulfilling what they want. Things like not using ivermectins in the cattle, or making sure that we remove the cattle when it's been overgrazed and things like that. Like just making sure that you understand what their outcomes are, and to develop the relationship and maintain that, rather than it being that sort of push-pull of a landlord-tenant relationship.
What have been the big challenges with those three, landlord, wildlife trusts, national trust?
I think sometimes there has been moments where the communication is broken down. I think maintaining the communication is really important, making sure that you take time to sit down and plan the season. There has been a few times when the conservation bodies have turned around and been like, we need the cows off next week, and we're like, we can't do that, because moving 20 cows off a site is not as easy as just turning up and doing it in half an hour. So there's been a few times when it's got a bit prickly, but I think that's just due to lack of communication, and I think once we've fixed that in various ways, just making sure that we have WhatsApp groups and things like that, it's been much better.
Okay, you've kind of alluded to a bit of this already, but you're now running a pretty diversified business.
Yeah.
How's that working and helping you achieve what you need to achieve?
Yeah, so we actually, Peter's in the audience, but at the beginning of the farm, we had Peter Grieg from Piper's Farm down to mentor us, and he said, whatever you do, just stick with running livestock and don't set up a direct sales business. So obviously, what we did as soon as he left was to set up a direct sales business. And he still looks at us like that today. So, and then to add insult to injury, we not only now run a direct sales business, but just before Christmas, we took back our butchery in hand as well. So we now have a butchery and farm shop on site, and Peter will never forgive us for it. But I think part of that is just because the Isle of Wight does have some limiting factors in that we don't have such a pool of butchers and things that we can use, and those ones that we do have can sometimes have a bit of monopoly, which doesn't work for us financially. And we got to the point when we had enough throughput to justify having our own in-hand butchery, and we also wanted to have the control so we can do things like nitrate-free bacon, nitrate-free sausages, also just our own, being able to, because we have a relationship with the customer, to then be able to, they ask for a 3 rib of beef, and being able to do that straight for them is really important for us. And actually, we've only been doing it for a month and a half or something, but so far it's going really well. But we're running that actually in collaboration with a chef who has a prep kitchen on the estate, and who we also ran a big pop-up restaurant with last year. And I think, again, it's just a power of collaboration and making sure that when you don't have the skill sets within your team, that you go out and work with other people that do. And it took a massive weight off our mind that he could do all of the health and hygiene stuff, and we had some synergies with, he's making ready meals, so all of the meat that doesn't get sold through the butchery will then go through that. And I think just having an eye to the fact that you don't necessarily, you might have a vision for your business, but you might not have the skills within it. And I think sometimes I do get frustrated when people say that all farmers should diversify, because some farmers just want to be farmers, and that's fine. And I think that should be something that is financially viable. But we did feel passionately right from the beginning that we wanted to run a direct sales business. And actually, Hollie has really taken that on. So in some ways, she is the direct sales business and I'm the farm, and we've worked it quite well like that.
Can you talk a bit about how you started that? Because I know I'm aware that there was quite a lot of work that went into planning, and I guess I'd be interested to know how customer-led that was. With the current butchery? Yeah. I mean, I guess, a lot of how you've developed.
Yeah, so at the beginning, we started out just literally sending the animals away, it coming back VAT packed, putting it in a freezer, sending it out. So we had a website, and we were delivering to doorsteps in insulated bags. It worked really well, and we still have all of those existing those customers. They've been very loyal to us. And I think part of it was just we got feedback over and over again that people wanted to be able to come and choose what they're buying. And I suppose just when you look into the market research, just trying to make sure that you can offer different access to your product. And also to offer more fresh product as well. And having our own butchery means that we can offer much more fresh product, whereas before we were running frozen, which we'll still do some and some to balance the carcass, but that has been quite interesting to see how much people do really value that fresh meat. Yeah.
I totally agree with the need to create an economic model for farming that doesn't require huge amounts of diversification. But having said that, would you recommend what you've done to other people?
I think if you could get an access to market where they will pay the value, so the wholesale value. So we currently now actually have split our business into two parts. So we have the farming business, and then the butchery and farm shop is now a separate business. And both of those we've modelled to be financially viable. And I think it's really important, and this is my little high horse, but I think that something that we're really passionate about at the beginning, I think because I came from a background in land agency, is I wanted the farm to be financially viable. I didn't want to run it as a hobby. I didn't want it to just be ploughing all of its money back in. And yes, we've done that for the first 3 years, as was the plan on the spreadsheets, and we're following those projections. But I think it's really important to make sure that you value your time in all of these businesses, and that you make sure that each of those enterprises is financially viable, not just across the whole. We do have some that are, so the chickens are slightly less labour intensive, so they probably give you a little bit more pounds per hour than the pigs or whatever, but you do need to make sure that every part of your enterprise, every part of your farm is financially viable, because otherwise you're not running a business, you're just a hobby farmer. And I think that, we buy fair trade coffee because we don't want people to be working for free, and yet so many farmers in the UK are working for free or relying on free labour. And I think it is possible to run financially viable businesses and farming businesses if we just really drill down and make sure that we're really careful with each of our enterprises that they are doing that.
So speaking of spreadsheets, should we have a look at your spreadsheet?
Yeah, we can do, yeah. Oh, sorry. That's the butchery. So that's our butchery and farm shop, and then on the other side, that's our pop-up restaurant. So during the summer, we worked with a local chef, and we had over 1,000 people a weekend in a barn. Actually, it was mainly these guys, just over and over and over again. But and so these are the figures. They're really tiny. I couldn't really work out how to make them bigger, but I just wanted to be really open source about figures, and I don't know if anyone wants to take a picture of those afterwards or whatever, but essentially this is our projections for the next few years. We are just about to start turning enough profit to pay ourselves, because we have been building the business up until now. A lot of the money, as you will see, does come from where it says fixed income. That is environmental schemes and grazing payments. So whilst I would love to run a farming business that makes all its money from growing produce, it's tricky. And I think we will be able to hone our systems even more. I think we want to work on the cattle breeds that we use to make sure that they are more they have a bigger financial output. But fundamentally, our farm is going to be, a lot of the profit will come from the public money for public goods, SFI, countryside stewardship, and things like that. I think that is the reality for most farmers, and that's what that money is there for. And we also make sure that we run a business so all of our enterprises fit into those schemes. So we knew that we were going to have to, cash in on that money, and it was a really important part of our business planning that we planned outwintering our cattle, and the way that we manage the cattle, that we could then claim the subsidies that are available.
I mean, it looks to me like you're doing pretty well, even if those subsidies did change.
Yeah, it's not too bad, but...
Yeah. Right, so we've got to about 25 minutes, so we've got 20 minutes left. I expect there's going to be loads of different kind of angles that people are coming at this from in the audience, so we're really keen to get your views, your questions. We're really keen to know if Peter still thinks this is bonkers. So please, if you have a question, pipe up. Otherwise, we'll try and we will just keep the conversation going.
Questions?
Yeah. So one at the back, Sarah.
Hello, and thank you very much, and thank you for sharing so much. I just had a question around investment into sort of large capital things such as butcheries and, might be restaurants for some people. For yourself, is that capital investment that you're have a plan on the spreadsheet for it will be repaid by, or is it written off capital investment?
No, so yeah, part of the money that we're making here will be going back into repaying the investment. So the initial investment in the farm, we set up the farm on £40,000, and then we just ploughed back in for the last 3 years on the farm side. The butchery and farm shop, it cost £35,000, and that, again, we've got a repayment plan for that over the next 3 years. But that includes being able to pay ourselves straight away on the butchery and farm shop one, and then with this, we'll be able to pay ourselves and repay our investment over the next, hopefully, 3 to 5 years, yeah.
Yes, Rebecca. Oh, wait a second. We do need to get you to speak into a microphone, I'm afraid.
Okay. Thank you so much for being so open. And I'm lucky enough to know Francesca and Hollie anyway. So I am going to take the liberty of knowing you already and ask a question, particularly for those who have kids and are balancing family life. What would be your advice to women with young children or children of any age who want to get into farming, like you did, but feel too scared to, potentially?
Yeah, I suppose I didn't really mention, did I, that when we took on the farm, we had 4 children under 7, and Hollie was pregnant with her 3rd child. So it was a challenging time and not ideal time to be taking on a farm. But I suppose both of us were just really passionate about what we were doing. I mean, Hollie was farrowing pigs with Prim strapped onto her. And I think sometimes it's just about the drive to do it. And also we did try to make sure that we designed our farm so that we didn't, we have automatic doors on our chickens, so we don't have to get up at the crack of dawn because it has to fit around family. We have to do the school run first and make sure that all of our enterprises are able to be flexible enough to fit around kids. And also we did support each other massively, and we do support each other massively. And I think that they all go to the same school, so we share school pickups, and sometimes all of the kids are in the farmhouse with Hollie while I'm running around. And I think that working in collaboration with someone else is really invaluable when it came to the kids, yeah. And that the kids all got on was quite good too.
Okay, well, quickly that one at the back. Then I'll come to Peter, then Arizona here, and then that lady there.
Hi, just wondering about the financial share agreement you have with your landowner, and how you've kind of come, or what, if you have a ratio split, or how you've kind of worked that out.
Yeah, so it's based on a model template, which is actually, I think it's open source, available from the CLA, and I sort of just butchered it a bit. But essentially what you do is, so he puts in the land, so I valued that at like an FBT rent. I think it's in about £85 an acre, and then we put in our time. So we also then had to work out what our value was, and we've actually negotiated a change in that over the past 3 years. We're just renegotiating the share farming agreement because we did put ourselves in as farm labourer wages, and now we're putting ourselves in at more like a management wage, and then things like machinery. So anything that we bring is on our side. Anything that's sort of buildings, that's all on his side. And then once you value those two things, you use that to give you a profit split. And at the moment, we're on 25/75, but actually he's putting a load more land in, and we're upping our value. And so that's going to change. He's going to be having about 30% of the business, and we'll have 70%.
Could you come down to the front here, please? So just Peter, who's just there. Thanks.
Hi. Thanks, Francesca. You have name-checked me, and I'm very, very happy for that. I just, without putting too specific a spotlight on a counter of fresh meat as the part of the business that I'm dubious about, do you have a vision? Because you guys have come a very long way in 4 years, a very, very long way from when I first came, and you had a small holding that was 100 square meters, and you had a farmer's market stall. Do you have a vision for where you want to take this? Because potentially, in my mind, you could cover enormous acres on the Isle of Wight and do an amazing farming job. So have you got a longer term strategy? Because instinctively, I think that's very, very important.
Yes, and I think that, like I said earlier, the way that we've split it out, Hollie's passion has always been the direct sales and developing products, and she's now working really closely with the chef on the estate to do that. I think her vision is to build a really exciting direct sales, high nutrient dense food business that will be based around products that come off our farm, but also working with, we don't have lamb, so we work with other shepherds and things to do that. And then I think my side of the business will be growing our relationships. So we've got more conservation grazing. We're looking into the genetics of the cattle to make sure that they're really, we want to make sure that the cattle that we raise are carbon neutral, so making sure that they grow quick enough to do that. And I think because there are two of us, and I think that we're now taking that forward, and also hopefully freeing ourselves up a little bit by getting a stockman and some people to help work in the shop and to just really push forward our individual visions. And I think it's been really interesting for us, where we went in with a shared vision at the beginning, and we still very much have a shared vision, but to also look at what our strengths are and to acknowledge that and to move those parts forward. And I think we do have almost two sections of the business that will be moving forward with almost two separate but cohesive visions, yeah.
A very quick question from me to follow on from that. How often are you practically doing the same thing, as in the same place, doing the same task?
Yeah, so we do try to make sure that we do overlap sometimes. Like, for example, on big cattle days and things, we'll do those together. And we do love working together as well. And also we quite like to know that we can always cover each other. So we try to work together at least once or twice a week for most of the day. Doesn't always happen, and sometimes we are like ships in the night, which is a shame. But I think ideally we would like to make sure that we do spend that time together.
Arizona.
Thanks. So inspired by what you're doing. I just want you to know I think you're amazing and really, really proud of you. And my question is about community building. You're already farming in community in a small way because it's the two of you and your families. What do you think about the greater picture of shared responsibility? Because farming can be so much responsibility for one or two families. What about diversifying the responsibility and sharing it among a much larger group of people, which is almost impossible sometimes now with land zoning and things like that, but looking at a future where community building is perhaps one of our only ways forward into a truly regenerative future. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Is it possible? How could it work? Yeah,
I think we're really lucky to be on the estate that we're on, and Rob is so keen to bring lots of different other local businesses on. So he had this heron restaurant, so the chef that we worked with, and then he's also got a microbrewery there and a distillery, and he's just really keen that anyone else comes onto his land and shares that vision with him for this vibrant rural estate. And I think that it might be quite antiquated, but I worked for rural estates, and they're sort of seen as this Downton Abbey thing. But I mean, if you look back, there were so many people working on the land doing various different things, and I think there is a model which is almost going back to a really good traditional rural estate where it supports a whole load of different people with different skills, and you might not be doing the same thing. You might not all be moving cows, but you might be able to pop over to the microbrewery to pick up the grains to take to the pigs, and you get to have a conversation. And it is important because it's really isolating otherwise, working on your own in your little silos. But I think it is also difficult to make enough money to support a lot of people through producing primary products. So I think it is looking at other opportunities on the land, whether there are different things. So for example, we'd really like someone to come and run some educational stuff on the farm. That would be something else, and layering things. But quite often it would be quite nice if other people came to us with visions, because we can't always be like, this is what we want to do. I mean, we'd love to have a market garden. We'd love to have a micro dairy, all of these things. And yeah, it'd be nice if we could have other people doing that rather than us just managing everything, yeah.
There was a woman just a bit further back on the right with her hand up.
Almost to follow on from what you just talked about, it occurs to me that if we are going to get more people working on these kind of, or reimagining our rural estates, housing is a big challenge. What's your housing situation? How did you be able to be close to the farm? But then also, if you're going to bring other people onto the farm, where are they going to live as well?
Yeah, there are some residential properties on the estate. I was lucky to already I can see the estate from my house anyway, so I'm only 2 minutes up the road. Holly moved on to the farmhouse on the estate. So the building team, he lives on the estate. There are some houses, and I think that, I think it is a challenge. We were talking about this yesterday, potentially static caravans, but it's not really a long-term solution. We do have a town right next to us, so people could live there and walk into the estate quite easily. But I think it is a challenge, and I think trying to offer wages that are high enough to then get people to come down and move to the island is going to be a challenge.
I'm just going to quickly chuck in another question too, which is about grazing, and you've talked about trying to get the right genetics and make sure your animals are sequestering carbon and doing a good thing for the environment. How on earth do you manage grazing across so many different parcels, or, particularly now you're getting to over 1,000 acres? What's been your plan and your strategy for that?
Winging it. Well, we have a plan. And then don't they say you have to have plan A, B, C, D, whatever. We did have a plan, so we took on a load of conservation grazing this year. We were going to buy a load of sucklers, a load of stores, and stick them out there. In the end, we bale graze on heavy clay in our parkland, and there was various things that went slightly wrong. So we had a chat and worked out that actually we're just going to throw the girls up on the down. So that's what we did. So they're out standing on the top of a down, and they love it. And I think the thing is with the conservation grazing, it's really extensive. It's quite easy to manage in lots of ways. Our cattle are perfectly suited to it. They stand out there all year round. We never really worry about them. They don't need their feet trimming. They don't really bother dog walkers and stuff. And I think the thing is that there are some of these practical challenges that can be quite difficult, but we've been quite lucky with the type of cattle that we decided to have at the beginning, and that fits really well with what these conservation charities wanted. It's quite low stocking density, so we don't have huge numbers of cattle out there. I think the biggest challenge for us is managing the lowland bale grazing and mob grazing through the summer. It's always just a little bit more intensive, but with the other sites it's just a once a day check, and so that's quite easy. One thing we're definitely going to do though is get GPS collars so we can find them because sometimes they're stood right at the top and other times they're completely buried in gorse, and we have to try and find them. Becca's laughing because she does the same.
So some more. This isn't working now. Maybe it is. So we've got one from Henry here, I think had her hand up first, then the gentleman at the back, then Katie Rose at the front. Yeah.
So, Francesca, access to land, I think, is a huge problem. You have managed to achieve it. You've talked a bit about other enterprises stacking on the estate, how you would like that with education, with maybe market gardens. Is there any sort of conversation that you could have with the room about how you've made it happen? Because I feel that there's an awful lot of people who feel very frustrated that they don't have access to land. I think in a conversation we had just now, you said, there's no way I would want to own the land, but, you've obviously found a way of working with your landlords to make it happen.
Yeah, and I think sometimes I was very lucky because I had a lot of the skills needed to put together a business plan to be able to pitch that to a landowner. And I think if there could be a way that there was more support, that people could get help to be able to write those initial business plans, that they could then pitch it to people. Because I think there are a lot of landowners out there that want exciting people on their land. There's something that's gone wrong in the middle, because as soon as we seem to find that magic formula, it seems like we're just offered land all the time now. And I think that if people really want to get access to land, then making sure that you have a robust business plan that we even branded it. We made it look beautiful. We put loads of pictures in of our vision, and we just tried to really sell it. And I think in any other industry, if you were going to go into business, you would have to do all of that work. And I think that there is something within the farming community, and especially with actual people who are currently in farming, who seem to think that they should just be offered bits of land, whereas actually you have to just do that little bit of work, and you'd have to do that in any other industry to start a business, and that's all we did. I think something which, it was weird because I'd never really thought about it, but someone, I think it was a year ago or something, said, well, you're a young entrepreneur. And I'm like, I'm a farmer, I'm not an entrepreneur. And they're like, no, you're running a business, you're an entrepreneur. And I think I'd worked with farmers for my whole professional career, and I don't think many farmers would call themselves entrepreneurs, but they're small business owners, and they're doing things to market, build their product, and run these amazing, diverse businesses. And I think that the more we view ourselves as entrepreneurs and then use all the skills that are out there, looking at marketing, looking at branding, looking at business planning, then I think that would help oil those wheels, and that I think a lot of people would be able to find that magic formula and be able to get in front of people, because there are a lot of landowners out there that do want exciting young people on their land.
One point that you spent some time living as a vegan, in part because of the carbon impact of farming. So I'm guessing that you're possibly not a vegan anymore. And if you're not, it'd be good just to understand the mindset changes, the journey you've taken, how you monitor the carbon, and what are the steps you want to take that you're not able to take so far.
Yeah, I have to be very honest and say that we didn't do the baseline surveys that we should have done, and we are going to start doing the surveying through the SFI because there's a lot of funding available through that now. So we are going to be monitoring that more. I think we've just been trying to work out how to be farmers up to this point, and following models from farmers who have proven these concepts. So the mob grazing concepts that we very much have worked with Silas, who used to be at FAI Farms, and looked at what they did with the carbon capture there. And other, PFLA farms that are doing it and have monitored it. So at the moment, we're just doing the practical side of it. I think that for us, both Hollie and I actually, we struggled with our health when we were vegan. I got really sick and got pernicious anemia and all sorts of things, and had to stop being vegan. And at that point, went on a big deep dive into regenerative meat. And I think at the time we just bought it from Piper's Farm. But then we decided that we wanted to try and create something on the island that was producing meat that we were happy to eat from a planetary perspective, from an animal welfare perspective. And I think that we are doing that, and I think that I am proud of the products that we are producing, and I think that there is a big debate about less but better meat, and I think that it is important that we do continue to explore eating more plants and limiting the amounts of meat that we eat. But I think that it is possible to have really planet-friendly meat production in this country.
I think I'm going to have one more question. Sorry to the gentleman at the back who had his hand up as well. Rose, I felt like that question was a tee up for you, Rose.
I won't go into my vegetarian past. Actually, I wanted to ask, what did your landlord put at risk when he took you two on? So what sort of investment did he put in, and how long did he commit to allow you to do whatever you were going to do with your poaching cattle in winter or whatever? I'm joking about that, but it's putting some trust in people who didn't know each other. Yeah. And just very quickly, what you are thinking about with the genetics around the cattle and reducing their carbon footprints. Are you getting rid of the belted Galloways or changing the...
We might have to, yeah. So with the exposure and risk, I think fundamentally it was quite low risk. It was 120 acres of not very exciting pasture land that we had... in order to make that work, we had to run all these different enterprises, and so we could see a vision for it. But as far as the actual risk for him, it was quite a small area of land in the grand scheme of the rest of his estate. And also because we were proposing to run all of our animals outside year round, it meant that it freed up loads of his buildings, which meant that he could then rent all of those out for boat storage that he could get megabucks for. So actually, the way that we were proposing to farm, which meant that we didn't need those other parts of the assets that he could cash in on, I think in some ways it was a net gain for him. And like I say, we started out on quite a small footprint, so it wasn't a huge risk. With the cattle, I know. So 5 years, and we're just extending it for another 5 years. But because we're in a share farming agreement, we're very much tied together. And I think that's the thing that I wouldn't want to be in a situation where I had a secure tenancy for 20 years, but you fall out with your landowner and actually you're there on because he has to let you stay. I think that for us, it's all about the relationship and maintaining that going forward and maintaining a shared vision. And with the cattle, the belted Galloways, I had 3 belted Galloways at the small holding that I'd got as pets. And so when we did the business plan, they were the vision, or they were the pictures in the vision document, and he loved them, so we decided to stick with it. They're a bit too small. Our chef doesn't really like the fact that the primals are quite small. They take about 36 months to finish. And they're amazing because they do sort of stand up there and they put on weight on conservation grazing. But I think that because we are quite warm on the Isle of Wight, they don't need to be quite that hardy. They've got a double coat, which means they don't have quite so much marbling in the meat as well, which isn't great. And they also put a lot of energy into doing that. So I think that we'd like to move towards something, either just using a terminal sire. So at the moment we've got a pedigree belted Galloway bull, and we've also got an Angus. So we're going to try some hybrid vigour. If not, I think we'd look at maybe a beef shorthorn.
Well, so I think that's it, unfortunately. I hope you all agree. These sessions are fantastic. I think maybe there's a question that we should be running them over an hour and a half, because I think there are lots of questions we didn't quite get to. We didn't really talk about the pigs as much as we probably could have done. Anyway, I'm sure you can collar Francesca afterwards if you do have other questions. Thank you for coming over lunchtime, and enjoy the rest of your conference. Thank you, Francesca.